Welcome to Spoiled Vision Movie Recaps. Today, we delve into the 2012 action drama Kenshin Origins. Spoilers ahead, proceed with caution. Kenshin Origins commences in Kyoto with a confrontation between rebel forces and the shogun's loyal troops. The aim to achieve a peaceful revolution to overthrow the ruling party of the shogunate, which had enforced a new policy concerning foreign traders. This conflict had been ongoing since 1864 and culminated in the Battle of Kyoto in 1868. The battle was fierce, resulting in numerous casualties on both sides. Eventually, the rebel forces emerged victorious, raising the imperial flag to signify the dawn of a new era of peace. During this time, the commander of the shogun's support troops, known as the Shinsengumi, was Hajime Saito. Learning of their defeat, Saito desired one final duel with a rebel known as the Cold-Blooded Slayer, or Himura Battosai. Battosai was a formidable samurai, capable of dispatching foes swiftly with minimal injury. As peace prevailed, a swordsman named Kenshin intended to relinquish his violent ways. However, Commander Saito unexpectedly challenged him to a duel to settle their unfinished business. Kenshin, desiring to keep his promise to his wife and renounce killing, buried his sword as a symbol of his newfound pacifism. Shortly thereafter, a lone Shinsengumi samurai emerged from among the fallen bodies and accidentally touched Kenshin's sword. Sensing its history of bloodshed, the young samurai realized it was the notorious Battosai's weapon. The story then shifts to Japan, a decade after the era of peace, under the rule of Emperor Hermano Yamada. During this time, a wealthy Japanese businessman named Takeda Kaminari posed a threat to the welfare of the Japanese people. Takeda had amassed his fortune through the illegal sale of opium-like drugs to both foreigners and Japanese citizens. In his quest to streamline opium production, he sought a drug compounder and contemplated eliminating one of them to eliminate competition. Takeda made the fateful decision to eliminate the male medicine maker while sparing the female Mengumi. Sensing danger, the druggist fled through Takeda's office window. When Takeda's men prepared to pursue him, Takeda intervened and instructed his imposter, Battosai, to take charge. The following day, Saito, along with Shinsengumi police officers, stumbled upon the lifeless body of the drug's creator, triggering an investigation into the murder. While some officers suspected it was the work of Battosai, Saito believed his assailant was a fake, based on his previous encounter with the real Battosai. Meanwhile, the genuine Kenshin, alias Battosai, was taken aback upon discovering a police wanted poster for a Battosai committing murders and causing terror. Kenshin suspected that a samurai was impersonating Battosai to sow chaos. Amidst this, a young woman suddenly brandished a wooden sword at Kenshin, mistaking him for Battosai. Kenshin, carrying a non-lethal sword, deftly avoided her attack while trying to protect his food. He clarified that he was a wanderer and his sword had a blunt edge, preventing its use for harm. After this explanation, the girl, Keiru Kamiya, apologized and offered Kenshin her handkerchief to clean his clothes. Meanwhile, Saito visited Takeda's headquarters to interrogate him, suspecting Takeda's involvement in the murder orchestrated by the false Battosai. Saito disclosed that the victim was an undercover police officer investigating the case. However, due to insufficient evidence, Takeda remained beyond arrest. That evening, Takeda received news that Mengumi, his opium chemist, had fled their base. Concerned about his business's jeopardy, Takeda dispatched his men, posing as Battosai, to locate Mengumi. Dundo, a samurai who survived the Battle of Kyoto 10 years ago, was the one who found the original Battosai's sword, which had become Kenshin's possession. Mengumi, having sought refuge at the Shinsengumi police station, soon found herself pursued by Hulu. Tragically, Hulu mercilessly slaughtered all the Shinsengumi police officers at the base, leaving Mengumi terrified and seeking refuge in a room. Securing the door with a stick, Hulu relentlessly advanced towards her location. Thankfully, she managed to escape by shattering the police station window during the riot. Amidst the chaos, Judo, the false Battosai, killed a police officer and discarded his body off a bridge. Kiru, who happened to be nearby, recognized Judo as the wanted Battosai and prepared to confront him, wielding her wooden sword. Kiru held a deep personal grudge against the Battosai, as he had brutally murdered her father years ago. However, Judo effortlessly incapacitated her with a single strike. Just as Kiru fell, Kenshin, drawn by the commotion, rushed to her aid and saved her from Judo's assault. Udo recognized Kenshin as the legendary figure he had been searching for, owing to his exceptional speed and precision in combat. As Udo was about to attack Kenshin, the Shinsengumi police force arrived on the scene. Kenshin seized this opportunity to escape with Kiru, taking her to her family's hermitage. Grateful for his assistance, Kiru explained that her father used to run a school at the hermitage, which was later converted into a small retreat after Battosai's terror 6 months ago. Now, the hermitage had only one male student named Yahiko. The following day, a gang of thugs barged into Kiru's mansion, pressuring her to sell it to them. Despite her firm refusal and insistence that the property was her father's legacy, the thugs resorted to destruction and chaos. Kenshin returned to the scene and skillfully defeated each thug without weapons, even when faced with a large group simultaneously. Using 2 wooden sticks, he demonstrated his non-lethal fighting style, astonishing everyone. Kenshin then revealed his identity as the infamous Battosai, the most feared in history. Learning this, Kiru, who had sought revenge for her father's death, was left in contemplation. Soon after, several Shinsengumi police officers arrived and arrested all involved in the chaos, including Kenshin. He was briefly detained at the police station before being presented to Admiral Yamagata by Saito. Yamagata is informed by Saito that Kenshin, a once rebellious samurai, had committed numerous killings to bring about a new era of peace in Japan. Following this revelation, Yamagata decides to seek Kenshin's help in eliminating all those involved in opium production, as he views the opium trade as a significant threat to their people and country. However, Kenshin refuses the task, as he has sworn off killing since the era of peace began. Upon learning of Kenshin's decision, Saito takes Kenshin's sword and questions how he can protect others with a reverse-bladed sword. Kenshin explains that he can safeguard those around him without resorting to lethal force. Saito then challenges Kenshin to a one-on-one duel to test his resolve. After a brief fight, Admiral Yamagata intervenes and instructs Saito to release Kenshin, accepting Kenshin's decision not to kill further. Meanwhile, Megumi, who had been on the run, crosses paths with Yahiko. She pleads for his help and takes refuge in his home. As Kenshin is released from Shinsengumi police custody, he finds Kiru waiting for him in front of the police headquarters. Recognizing Kenshin's plight, she invites him to return to her home. Despite knowing Kenshin's true identity as Battosai, the man who killed her father, Kiru is eager to repay him for his actions, believing in Kenshin's remorse and desire for personal change. Kiru later informs Yahiko that Kenshin will be living with them from that day forward. With Yahiko's assistance, Megumi introduces herself to Kenshin and Kiru. They eventually bond over a conversation at night, leading Kiru to invite both Megumi and Kenshin to dine at a tavern. Though Kenshin struggles with expressing himself, he finds solace in the warmth and sense of togetherness he has long missed. Not long after, Takeda and his men approach Kenshin, having learned of his past as Battosai. Takeda offers Kenshin a role as his bodyguard in exchange for money. Kenshin, however, refuses this association with a mafia member like Takeda. Shortly thereafter, a young man named Sagara Sanosuke arrives, offering himself as Takeda's bodyguard. Sanosuke, an ex-convict seeking to earn money working for Takeda, challenges Kenshin to prove his worth. Kenshin and Sanosuke leave the diner to avoid causing a scene. Sanosuke launched his initial attack on the city bridge, swinging his long sword at Kenshin. Surprisingly, Kenshin chose not to counterattack and merely evaded the strike. He eventually stepped on Sanosuke's sword, questioning whether a skilled fighter like Sanosuke genuinely wanted to work for someone like Takeda. This query left Sanosuke speechless and conflicted, leading him to cease his fight with Kenshin and decline working for Takeda. Driven by his obsession to become a Battosai, Kudo avenged the thugs who had attacked Kaoru's dojo by massacring them. On the following evening, Saito and the police officers investigating the thugs' deaths commenced their inquiry. Nearby, Kenshin encountered a grieving young woman mourning her family's death in the massacre, a scene that reminded him of a painful memory. In the past, Kenshin had killed a group of Shogun's party supporters, including his wife's future fiancé, who had inflicted the first scratch on Kenshin's face. Kenshin's wife was the one to create the second wound on his face. This haunting recollection made Kenshin question the worth of the massacres he had undertaken to achieve peace and pushed him to relinquish his dark past as the cold-blooded Battosai. Kenshin now led a peaceful, ordinary life with Karu, Megumi, and Yahiko, determined to protect them and make amends for his past mistakes. One day, people from around Karu's dojo sought her assistance in healing their ailing family members. The cause of the illness remained a mystery, but many residents were affected simultaneously. Kenshin and the others rushed to help, aiding in detoxifying the afflicted patients. Megumi, a medical expert, instructed Kenshin and Karu in performing the necessary treatments. Sanosuke, still in the area, provided assistance in any way he could. Under Megumi's guidance, the residents gradually recovered from the illness. Kenshin sought answers from Megumi about the cause of the townspeople's affliction, and she revealed that Takeda and his men had contaminated the district's water sources with dangerous drugs. This had led to the widespread illness among the residents. Megumi also shared that she was the sole surviving member of one of the city's most esteemed medical families. After her family perished in the Revolutionary War, she chose to work for Takeda to survive. Megumi's life took a dark turn as she worked as an opium producer and became Takeda's mistress, while he oversaw his illegal opium distribution business. Takeda's ruthless opium dealings caused immense suffering as many people fell victim to addiction, often meeting a horrifying end due to their inability to seek help. Upon hearing Megumi's tragic story, Kenshin recalled the mission assigned to him by Admiral Yamaga and contemplated the anguish inflicted by Takeda's greed. After deep reflection, Kenshin decided to head to Takeda's headquarters and aid the police in apprehending Takeda. As he prepared to leave the dojo, Sanosuke noticed Kenshin's intent to confront Takeda and offered his assistance. Just as they were about to depart, Karu rushed to inform Kenshin that Megumi had left the dojo. In her letter, Megumi expressed her intention to go to Takeda's headquarters alone and kill him. However, Megumi arrived at Takeda's headquarters and was initially welcomed by Takeda, who believed she sought to work for him again. But she swiftly grabbed a knife and attacked him, only to be subdued by Takeda's men. Takeda soon discovered that Kenshin and Sanosuke had arrived at his base with the goal of rescuing Megumi. In response, Takeda assembled his entire crew for a fierce battle. Kenshin and Sanosuke showcased their remarkable combat skills, taking down multiple opponents with just a few strikes. After a grueling confrontation, Kenshin managed to defeat Takeda's men with his blunted sword. Upon reaching Takeda's inner sanctum, they encountered two formidable adversaries, Inubushi and Gain. The fight was intense, but eventually concluded with Kenshin and Sanosuke emerging victorious. Following this, they hurried to Takeda's room to rescue Megumi, who was held hostage. However, their path was blocked as they encountered a barrage of bullets from a machine gun prepared by Takeda. Luckily, Yahiko managed to contact the Shinsengumi police, allowing Saito and Kenshin to confront Takeda. With Saito's tactical expertise, they succeeded in capturing Takeda and his men. While Saito secured Takeda, Kenshin and Sanosuke rushed to the room where Megumi was held. She informed Kenshin that Udo had gone to Karu's house and kidnapped her. Julio's sinister motive in kidnapping Karu was to provoke Kenshin's fury, aiming to compel him to revert to his Battosai persona. Following Google's instructions, Kenshin urgently raced to the location where Karu was being held that very afternoon. Upon arriving at the location, Udo launched an attack with a sword he had used in his previous killings. During their intense fight, Udo attempted to provoke Kenshin, aiming to push him back into his former Battosai persona, even resorting to a forbidden technique to paralyze Karu's lungs, forcing Kenshin to fight more aggressively. In the heat of battle, Hulu told Kenshin that to save Karu, he must kill Udo, which meant breaking the promise he made to Tomo 10 years ago. Regrettably, Kenshin found himself forced to break his vow and engage in a fierce battle with Udo. After a grueling confrontation, Udo was cornered and gravely wounded. Seizing the opportunity, Kenshin prepared to end Udo's life. However, as he poised his sword over Udo, Karu, who had fallen unconscious, regained her senses and implored Kenshin not to kill him. Fearing that this act might trigger Kenshin's return to his dark past as Battosai, she earnestly pleaded with him to spare Udo. Moved by Karu's plea, Kenshin abandoned his plan to kill Udo and instead chose to paralyze Udo's right arm. Unexpectedly, Muto took his own life with his sword, ending his forbidden technique against Karu. Kenshin then carried the unconscious Karu away from the scene. Several days later, Karu regained consciousness and found Kenshin absent from her side. She feared he might have left her and returned to his dark past. However, her anxiety was unfounded as she discovered that Kenshin had merely gone to the market to buy groceries. This realization filled her with gratitude and happiness, knowing they would continue to lead a peaceful life at the dojo, alongside Megumi, Sanosuke, and Yahiko. Rurouni Kenshin Kyoto Inferno opens in 1878 within a mine, where Japanese police commander Saito Hajime and his troops are conducting an operation to apprehend government rebel groups. During the mission, some police officers are killed by rebel group samurai. That night, Saito encounters Makoto Shishio, a Battosai leading the rebel group. Shishio, a former Battosai, aims to reinstate the shogun party that governed before the revolution brought about an era of peace. He invites Saito to join his cause, given the Japanese police's prior support for the shogun's party. However, Saito declines the offer, opting to remain neutral and prioritize justice. Following Saito's refusal, Makoto orders his men to attack him before departing. The scene shifts to Koru Kamiya's dojo, which now has numerous students eager to learn sword techniques to become samurai. Many students seek instruction from Kenshin, a legendary Battosai from the early revolutionary period. Kenshin, however, refrains from teaching them his deadly techniques, instead focusing on honing their hearts through Karo's sword techniques. On a typical day, while Kenshin was engaged in his usual activities, several police officers visited him, requesting his presence at the ministry office to meet the Interior Minister, Okubo. In response, Kenshin and Sanosuke made their way to Okubo's office to discover the reason for his summons. Upon their arrival, Okubo explained that he required Kenshin's assistance in defeating the rebel group led by Makoto Shishio. According to Okubo, Makoto was a former assassin who had served the shogun government and was renowned for his exceptional swordsmanship, capable of defeating multiple opponents simultaneously. However, Makoto was also infamous for being a ruthless Battosai, willing to kill anyone in his path, be they foes or allies. After the war, the government sought to betray Makoto and executed a cruel attempt to kill him, sending their best samurai to murder him and setting his body on fire. However, a miraculous snowfall extinguished the flames, allowing Makoto to survive, albeit with severe burns. Fueled by vengeance, he aimed to overthrow the new government. Okubo implored Kenshin to help stop Makoto and his army in Kyoto, preventing them from causing widespread chaos and jeopardizing the era of peace. Recognizing Kenshin's vow not to kill, Okubo granted him a week to contemplate the request. When Kenshin returned to Kamiya's dojo, he shared the task assigned by Okubo with Karu and the others. Concerned for Kenshin's safety and fearing his potential return to his Battosai persona, they urged him to decline the offer. A week later, Okubo, riding in his horse-drawn carriage, fell victim to an attack by Makoto's subordinate, Sojiro Sita, as part of Makoto's plan to overthrow the government. Upon learning of Okubo's death, Okubo's bodyguard implored Kenshin to head to Kyoto and halt Makoto's insurrection. Surrounded by the numerous police officers brutally killed by Makoto's troops, they emphasized the urgency of the situation. Saito, who was nearby, advised Kenshin to journey to Kyoto to track down Makoto's forces. Upon his return to the dojo, Kenshin informed Karu of his decision to accept Okubo's mission. Karu, although deeply concerned about Kenshin's potential return to his Battosai persona, remained silent, unable to hold him back. Kenshin, however, realized the danger of the mission and the possibility of his demise. He bid Karu farewell, expressing his gratitude for everything she had done for him. Upon Karu's arrival at Kamiya's dojo, she shared the news that Kenshin had chosen to journey to Kyoto. Sanosuke, upon hearing this, became infuriated because Kenshin had gone alone and not allowed him to join the mission. His frustration led him to leave the dojo. While he was outside, Sanosuke encountered a samurai inquiring about the whereabouts of Battosai. When he realized that the man was searching for Kenshin, Sanosuke tried to dismiss him, claiming that there was no Battosai present. However, the persistent samurai continued to press Sanosuke for information, attempting to attack him several times to force him to reveal Kenshin's location. Unfortunately, Sanosuke was nearly defeated in combat by the samurai's relentless attacks. It was Megumi's intervention that saved Sanosuke, preventing the samurai from delivering a potentially fatal blow. That night, as Kenshin was fetching drinking water from the river, an unknown girl suddenly appeared and stole his sword. Kenshin managed to track her down in a nearby village and reclaimed his sword. The girl's name was Misao, and she still sought to possess Kenshin's sword. They engaged in a brief scuffle. During their altercation, a boy approached them, seeking their assistance in saving his injured older brother, who turned out to be a disguised police officer. Kenshin and Misao offered their help and tended to the injured man. The following day, Kenshin and Misao went to the boy's village and were met with the devastating sight of its destruction. Upon their arrival, they discovered that the boy's parents had been brutally murdered and hanged from a tree. Over time, Makoto's men returned to the village with the intention of killing Kenshin, who was alone at the time. Consequently, Kenshin had no choice but to engage in a battle against all of Makoto's troops to protect the remaining villagers. Kenshin, as usual, displayed his exceptional combat skills and easily defeated all of Makoto's troop members without sustaining any injuries. Following a long and intense battle, Sojiro approached Kenshin and requested that he accompany him to meet Makoto. Upon reaching Makoto's residence, Kenshin challenged Makoto to a fight, but he declined upon seeing Kenshin's sword, which had a reversed sharp edge. Instead, Makoto asked Sojiro to represent him in a duel against Kenshin, allowing him to assess Kenshin's current abilities. Kenshin and Sojiro engaged in a brief yet intense battle characterized by incredibly swift movements. Unexpectedly, Sojiro emerged as the victor, breaking Kenshin's sword during the fight. The defeat led Kenshin to realize that Makoto's strength and abilities still surpassed his own. Following the battle, Kenshin returned to the village to reunite with Meizo and the boy he had previously assisted. Upon Kenshin's arrival, he found the remaining villagers beating up the men of Makoto who he had previously defeated. They even incited the boy who had asked for Kenshin's help to kill Makoto's troops in retaliation for his parents' deaths. As the boy was on the verge of committing murder, Kenshin intervened, urging him not to become a killer. Meanwhile, Makoto's associate, Hoji, completed preparations for the equipment and weapons they would use in the upcoming major battle at Makoto's headquarters in Kyoto. In addition to ensuring adequate weaponry, Makoto also tasked Sojiro with preparing a group of skilled samurai known as the 10 Swords. Sanosuke, still recovering from his wounds incurred during his fight with a samurai, intended to follow Kenshin to Kyoto. Megumi provided him with some medicines for use during their journey. Recognizing their inability to dissuade him, Sanosuke entrusted the prescription to Karu, stating it was her responsibility to tend to Kenshin's wounds. After a long journey, Kenshin arrived in Kyoto and unexpectedly crossed paths with Meizo once more. She extended an invitation for him to stay at an inn run by her cousin, Okina. During a conversation with Okina, Kenshin learned that Okina was a former member of the Shogun-era reconnaissance squad, known as the Oniwa Banshu. Okina then divulged information about Aoshi, a former leader of the Oniwa Banshu, who held a deep grudge against Kenshin. In the wake of the new imperial government replacing the Shogun regime, the government executed all members of the reconnaissance squad. Aoshi believed Kenshin was responsible for their fate, as Kenshin's actions had ushered in a new era in the country, ultimately leading to the massacre of Aoshi's comrades. Kenshin informed Okina that his primary reason for coming to Kyoto was to thwart Makoto's plans, and he wasn't presently concerned with Aoshi's issues. He then sought Okina's help in locating a man named Raijuda, who had once given him a reverse-edged sword. Late at night at Makoto's headquarters, one of Makoto's spies, Cho, secretly reported that Kenshin was in search of a new sword from Raijuda. The following day, Kenshin received information about Raijuda's whereabouts, only to discover that Raijuda had passed away several years prior. This reminded Kenshin of Raijuda, who had given him a reverse-edged sword, allowing him to protect others without taking lives. Subsequently, Kenshin visited Raijuda's son, Maro Saiku, and requested his assistance. Maro Saiku agreed to craft a new sword for Kenshin, although he had refrained from forging swords for some time, out of concern that his creations might be used for nefarious purposes. Kenshin respected Saiku's decision and departed after hearing his explanation. Shortly after Kenshin left, Cho reappeared and threatened Seiku with the last sword crafted by Raishaku. Since Seiku refused to comply with Cho's demands, Cho abducted his child and left the area. As a result, Seiku and his wife pursued Kenshin and implored him to help rescue their child, who was being held hostage by Cho. Kenshin rushed to a temple where Cho was holding Seiku's child captive and demanded that he release the child. However, Cho refused to heed Kenshin's request and instead initiated an attack, leading to an inevitable confrontation between them. Kiru and Yahiko, who had arrived in Kyoto, heard about a clash between two samurai at the temple and rushed to the scene, believing one of them to be Kenshin. Returning to the battle between Kenshin and Cho, Kenshin was forced to fight using the scabbard, as his sword had been broken in the previous altercation. Realizing that Kenshin lacked a sword, Seiku decided to provide Kenshin with the last sword forged by his father, which had been hidden in a warehouse. Seizing the sword during the fight, Kenshin used it against Cho. Cho attempted to provoke Kenshin in an effort to make him revert to being a killer by threatening Seiku's son once he discovered that Kenshin had acquired a new sword. However, Kenshin intervened and inflicted a serious wound on Cho before he could harm Seiku's child. Karu, who witnessed the incident, was terrified and tried to call Kenshin's name in an attempt to prevent him from reverting to being a murderer. However, upon closer inspection, Yahiko noticed that Kenshin's new sword had a sharp edge reversed, signifying that he had not killed Cho. After the battle, Seiku was able to retrieve his child, and Cho was taken into custody by Japanese authorities for questioning about Makoto's plan. Makoto intended to create a significant disturbance by setting Kyoto on fire the following night, according to information provided by Cho. Upon learning of Makoto's plans, Saito directed Kenshin and the police squad to prepare for the battle against Makoto's forces. Kenshin also sought Okina and a former member of the Oniwa Banshu squad for assistance in confronting Makoto's troops. The police began evacuating residents in the afternoon, urging them to relocate to a safer area. Towards the end, Kiru and Yahiko asked Kenshin if they could participate in the upcoming battle, despite its extreme danger. Kenshin initially declined, but Kiru's persistence led him to reluctantly allow them to join. On the other hand, Makoto and his troops had prepared an attack and a large-scale battle in Kyoto, with the intent to set fire to residents' homes and buildings when the battle commenced in the evening. As Kenshin is stranded on the beach, trying to save Kiru, who was thrown into the sea by Makoto's men, he struggles against the powerful waves. Unfortunately, he fails to locate Kiru and is eventually washed ashore. There, he finds himself helpless until a mysterious man appears out of nowhere and rescues him. In the movie Rurouni Kenshin, the legend ends. The story shifts to an island where a young boy is trying to give a proper burial to several people who died in an attack. The boy's actions reflect his desire to honor the deceased and pay his last respects to them. This is a brief overview of the events in the movie, and the story continues from there as Kenshin's journey to rescue Kiru and confront Makoto Shishio unfolds. Upon the man's inquiry about the boy's name, it was revealed that he was born as Kenshin, but he still goes by his given name Shanta. Recognizing Shanta's strong potential as a samurai, the enigmatic man decides to change Shanta's name to Kenshin and extends an invitation for Kenshin to accompany him. This man is Hiko Sujiro, who promises to train Kenshin to become a formidable swordsman. Awaking from a dream about his first encounter with his master, Sekiro finds himself in an old house, which happens to be his master's abode. Sekiro is the mysterious figure who discovered Kenshin on the beach and brought him to his residence. Upon hearing this, Kenshin inquires whether Sekiro found a girl who might have drifted with him. However, Sekiro explains that he found Kenshin alone, and that Kenshin had been unconscious for 3 days, indicating that anyone drifting with him likely did not survive. Kenshin then seeks his master's guidance in mastering the secret sword technique known as Hidden Mitsurugi, essential for his upcoming confrontation with the formidable rebel samurai named Makoto Shizio. Fortunately, Sekiro agrees to teach Kenshin, but proposes a test of Kenshin's abilities before commencing the training. Meanwhile, on Tokyo Beach, residents are shocked by the appearance of Makoto's massive warship, and they rush to warn others in the city. After docking the warship, Makoto fires several cannons, forcing residents and police officers to flee in terror. Simultaneously, Mezo rescues Okina, who has been seriously injured by Aoshi's attack. Mezo did not anticipate Aoshi, a former captain of the Oniwa Banshu squad, being so ruthless to Okina, a former member of the same squad. She becomes determined to exact revenge on Aoshi for this incident. Back to Kenshin, who is still honing his sword skills under Sechiro's tutelage. Despite Kenshin's efforts, Sechiro easily defeats him using only a wooden stick. Sechiro cautions Kenshin against misusing the hidden Mitsurugi technique, emphasizing that it should serve to protect the weak rather than further political interests. Kenshin declares his commitment to mastering the style to alleviate suffering in the country and bring peace to the Japanese people. Meanwhile, Makoto's troops, who have anchored their warships on Tokyo Beach, plan to meet with the Prime Minister, Hitoshi Haribumi, a government representative open to negotiations. Makoto pledges not to attack Tokyo if the government agrees to hand over Kenshin and execute him in front of them. When Hida learns of these conditions, he reluctantly decides to sacrifice Kenshin to save Tokyo and the Japanese government. Shortly after, Hito and the government initiated a campaign, distributing posters and leaflets in various locations, urging the public to report Kenshin's whereabouts to the police. Kenshin was now an official fugitive, facing imminent execution in front of rebel forces. The Oniwa Banshuin received word of Kenshin's impending execution by the government. Shanta, Silk, and the others were deeply disappointed with the government's decision, still uncertain about Kenshin and Karu's location. Simultaneously, they received relief upon learning that Kenshin was still alive. Soon after, news arrived that Karu had been found and was under hospital care. The group rushed to the hospital to check on her. Upon arrival, Karu remained unconscious, battling a high fever. On the other hand, Kenshin persevered in his attempts to overcome his master, who only wielded a wooden stick. Despite being repeatedly knocked down by Sechiro's attacks, Kenshin refused to give up. The training stirred memories of his past, where he had tenaciously risen after every fall. In the meantime, Okina, fully awake, instructed Mezo to locate Kenshin upon hearing of his survival. That night, Sechiro inquired about the scars on Kenshin's face, and Kenshin explained that he had acquired them during his past. Sechiro then asked whether the person Kenshin was about to face was also about his eye like them. Kenshin acknowledged that Makoto was much stronger than himself, and even Makoto's men had defeated him in a sword duel. Kenshin revealed that Makoto was an exceedingly perilous figure in the country, willing to go to any lengths to defeat him, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. Hearing this, Sechiro took action to assist Kenshin in learning the hidden Mitsurugi technique. However, before teaching the technique, Sechiro advised Kenshin to reflect on his past mistakes in previous battles. Kenshin struggled to identify his errors that night, but only realized them the following morning. On that morning, Sechiro handed him a sharp sword and challenged him to a serious duel to demonstrate the flaws in his previous approach. The fierce battle between them had begun, with Sechiro's true intention being to push Kenshin to his limits. When Kenshin was cornered and nearly defeated, he discovered the very mistake his master had been alluding to, his lack of fear of death. Sechiro explained that Kenshin's remorse for past mistakes had made him weak and unafraid of death, urging him to cultivate a strong will to survive and to start thinking about his own happiness as a path to becoming stronger. Santa Suk, meanwhile, discovered that Karu had left her room and ventured to the beach alone in search of Kenshin. Without delay, Santa and Yahiko hurried to the beach to retrieve Karu, who remained in critical condition. Upon learning about Kenshin's status as a wanted fugitive by the Tokyo police, Karu extended an invitation to them to go to Tokyo and find Kenshin. Returning to Kenshin, who had now mastered hidden Mitsurugi's sword techniques with his master's guidance, Sechiro unexpectedly revealed to Kenshin that Karu was still alive. Just as he was leaving Sechiro's house, Sechiro informed him that Karu had fled from the government and was at risk of execution in front of Makoto's troops. Before departing, Sechiro advised Kenshin to always be cautious and fight with the aim of returning from the battlefield alive. Kenshin then set sail for the Oniwa Banshuin to meet Okina before their journey to Tokyo. Upon their arrival at the inn, they discovered that Okina had left for the secret path Kenshin would later take intentionally. Okina's mission was to confront Aoshi, who remained obsessed with seeking vengeance against Kenshin. Despite being seriously injured, Okina fought Aoshi, not for revenge, but to awaken him. Unfortunately, due to his incomplete recovery, Aoshi easily defeated Okina and continued his search for Kenshin. Soon after, Kenshin and Nizao arrived at the location, rushing to save Okina. Aoshi finally encountered Kenshin after a lengthy wait, and their battle commenced. Kenshin attempted to confront Aoshi, who was still consumed by anger, all while recalling Sochiro's advice to fight with the fear of death. Mezo tried to assist Kenshin in defeating Aoshi, but Aoshi effortlessly tossed her to the ground. This incident fueled Kenshin's determination to succeed. Kenshin ultimately defeated Aoshi without causing him harm after an intense battle. Kenshin realized that Aoshi was still fixated on the title of Battosai and was willing to accept Aoshi's challenge for a second fight. Kenshin continued his journey to Kamiya's dojo. Upon arriving at the dojo, Megumi, who had been concerned about Kenshin's condition throughout, greeted him. Observing Kenshin's unkempt appearance, she provided him with a red shirt left by Karu. However, police from Tokyo surrounded Kamiya's dojo and apprehended Kenshin. Despite the brief struggle, Kenshin eventually surrendered to the police to prevent further harm. Meanwhile, at Makoto's headquarters, Hoji informed Makoto that the burns on his body were worsening, and he couldn't sustain prolonged combat. If Makoto fought for over 15 minutes, his body would overheat, potentially leading to his death. Returning to Kenshin, who had been arrested and brought before Prime Minister Hito, Hito offered his apologies to Kenshin for sacrificing him to prevent Makoto and his forces from dominating the Japanese government. That day, the police officers took Kenshin to the beach, where he was slated for execution in front of Makoto and his troops. Tokyo residents, including Karu and her friends, gathered to witness the execution. Karu, in anguish, repeatedly called Kenshin's name, pleading with the authorities to halt the execution. Regrettably, the execution proceeded uninterrupted. As everyone gathered, Hoji listed all of Kenshin's past transgressions, including the samurai he had killed. The executioner readied to behead Kenshin with a sword. However, unexpectedly, the executioner untied Kenshin's hands and unveiled his true identity in front of the crowd. The executioner was revealed to be Saito, and the execution had been a ruse devised by the police to enable Kenshin to get close to Makoto. The confrontation between government troops and Makoto's forces began, with Sanosuke joining the fray to assist the police in defeating Makoto's men. Subsequently, Kenshin and Sanosuke accompanied the police force to Makoto's warship, while Saito and the others sought to confront Makoto's troops still on Tokyo Beach. Saito, known for his prowess in defeating hundreds of samurai during the shogun's reign, remained superior and could even overcome members of Makoto's 10 Swords army. Upon arriving at Makoto's warship, Kenshin and Sanosuke engaged in battle with Makoto's troops and other police officers. Kenshin faced off against a monk who was one of the samurai of the 10 Swords army, emerging victorious despite severe injuries. Meanwhile, Kenshin had to confront Sojiro, who had defeated him earlier and threatened to break his sword. Thanks to his master's rigorous training, Kenshin managed to dominate the fight and defeat Sojiro until his sword broke. Simultaneously, the Japanese government directed troops to open fire on Makoto's warship. However, the commander of the troops abruptly stopped them, revealing that Kenshin was still aboard the ship. The intense battle between Kenshin and Makoto finally commenced. Initially, Makoto appeared superior, as Kenshin could only employ defensive moves without an opportunity to counterattack. Moreover, Makoto's sword could unleash scorching bursts of fire, making it even more challenging for Kenshin to contend with him. Fortunately, Saito arrived at the warship, and together with Sanosuke, they endeavored to defeat Makoto. Soon after, Aoshi arrived at the ship with the intent to kill Makoto, desiring to be the sole person to defeat Kenshin, the legendary Battosai. As a result, Makoto was forced to contend with 4 opponents simultaneously. Kenshin, Saito, Sanosuke, and Aoshi, despite facing Makoto alone, found themselves outmatched. Makoto dominated the battle and defeated Saito, Sanosuke, and Aoshi. Yumi, Makoto's female assistant, realized that Makoto had exceeded the fight's time limit, and his body was overheating. She begged Kenshin to stop the fight, but Makoto took advantage of the situation and stabbed Kenshin. In response, Kenshin had no choice but to strike Yumi's body. Makoto then moved Yumi's dying body to the other side of the room to continue the battle with Kenshin. This act of cruelty enraged Kenshin, and he unleashed a fierce attack. The fight concluded when Kenshin employed the hidden Nitsurugi stance he had learned from his master. After a grueling battle, Kenshin's hidden Mitsurugi struck Makoto's neck, sending him flying and causing him to fall to the floor with a single blow. Yumi's body was placed at the top of the stairs by Makoto, who was already dying due to overheating, which led to the burning out of his body. With Makoto's demise and the destruction of his warship, the Japanese government forces ultimately defeated his troops and secured Tokyo. Upon Kenshin and Sanosuke's arrival at a Tokyo beach, Prime Minister Hito and other Japanese officials welcomed them and paid tribute to the samurai. Kenshin's title as the Battosai was officially revoked, and his reputation was restored. The film concluded with a scene in which Kenshin and his friends lived in peace at Kamiya's dojo. After enduring all their trials, Kenshin finally confessed his feelings to Kaoru and asked her to join him in this new era. The story then shifts to 1879 at one of Japan's Okinawa train stations. Japanese police commander Sarah Hajime is conducting an operation to apprehend a Chinese mafia boss named Eneshi Yukishiro. Eneshi has been accused of illegally trading various weapons with the Japanese government and is suspected of being a member of a mafia that sold a warship to Makoto Shizuo, one of Japan's most wanted criminals. Consequently, the Japanese government directed Saito and the Japanese police to arrest Eneshi for further investigation. Eneshi, sporting scars from a past encounter, assaults several police officers. When Saito inquires about the legendary Japanese Battosai scars and receives no response, Eneshi decides to flee the scene. He jumps out of the train car and begins attacking several police officers, causing a significant commotion in the train station. The altercation continues inside the train, but Saito's troops manage to surround Eneshi, compelling him to surrender to the Japanese police. Surprisingly, when the Japanese authorities handed Eneshi over to the Chinese consulate, he was released, presumably to maintain peace between the two countries. Further investigation revealed that Eneshi was one of China's most influential mafia bosses, with some political clout in the government. This may explain why the Chinese government let him go, even though he had been caught illegally trafficking weapons. Kenshin and Kaoru, on the other hand, returned to their peaceful lives after the successful imprisonment of Makoto Shizuo. They shared a quiet dinner with their friends at a food stall in the evening. However, shortly after leaving the tavern with Sanosuke and Yahiko, Eneshi and his men bombed the tavern, causing it to burst into flames. Eneshi's motivations remained unknown, but it was clear that he held a personal grudge against Kenshin. That night, a police officer invited Kenshin to investigate a potential hideout where Eneshi's group might be preparing explosives. Unfortunately, they found no evidence at the location, except for a piece of paper with the message "Human Punishment." Kenshin informed the police chief that this message was something a samurai or Battosai might use to justify their actions. He remained puzzled about the identity of the perpetrator behind the tavern attack. Upon returning to Kamiya's dojo, where Kenshin lived with Kaoru, Megumi, and Sanosuke, Kenshin asked Megumi about his scar, which hadn't faded despite the wound being several years old. While Megumi wasn't certain, she had heard from a doctor that a samurai's wounds, stemming from feelings of rage in the pursuit of justice, wouldn't heal until that rage was resolved. The following night, while Kenshin and Sanosuke were conversing in front of Kamiya's dojo, a member of the police headquarters arrived, covered in wounds. The man reported that their dojo had been attacked by an unknown group, resulting in the death of many dojo members. As a result, they rushed to assist in rescuing other dojo members. On their way to the scene of the attack, several police officers approached them and informed them of another attack at the police chief's residence. Kenshin and Sanosuke, hearing this, decided to split up, with Kenshin heading to the police chief's house and Sanosuke going to the police dojo. Upon arriving at the police chief's house, Kenshin discovered that the person responsible for the brutal attack was one of Eneshi's men named Hyoko. When Hyoko was about to harm a family member of the police chief, Kenshin intervened, leading to a fierce and perilous battle. Suddenly, Hyoko aggressively attacked Kenshin with two machetes, one on each side, while Kenshin used only a single sword. In the midst of the battle, Kenshin managed to corner Hyoko and disarm one of his machetes, but Hyoko could still launch counterattacks with multiple strikes. Ultimately, Kenshin defeated Hyoko and inflicted severe injuries on him. Unfortunately, when Kenshin momentarily let his guard down, Hyoko seized the opportunity and detonated explosives, causing the entire building to go up in flames. Kenshin felt immense guilt when he witnessed others suffering due to someone's vengeance against him. On the other hand, Sanosuke had to face a bitter truth as well, since Enishi's men had slaughtered all the dojo members, and there was no one he could save. The next day, Kenshin unexpectedly encountered Enishi, who introduced himself as the younger brother of the girl Kenshin had killed 14 years ago. Enishi explained how he had intentionally relocated to Shanghai and struggled to build a powerful mafia organization to exact revenge on Kenshin. He revealed that he hadn't directly killed Kenshin to inflict pain on those close to him. Kenshin became even more distraught upon learning Enishi's goal, as he had to imagine the people he cared about being harmed one by one. Following the attack that claimed many lives, Japanese government officials ordered the Japanese police to tighten their security measures. Meanwhile, a Chinese politician named Hai Sing visited Enishi's headquarters to inquire about the continuation of their agreement. He wondered if Enishi would hand over his organization to Hai Sing once his revenge goal had been achieved. After Hai Sing's departure, Enishi reminisced about a previous incident in which he had tried to convince his older sister Tomo to leave Kenshin because he deemed him a dangerous person. The next day, Kenshin decided to inform Karu and the others that the recent attack by Enishi was an act of revenge. Enishi was the younger brother of Tomo, Kenshin's late wife, who had died from a wound inflicted by Kenshin's sword. Kenshin revealed that Tomo was the girl who had scratched his cheek 14 years ago. Their meeting had started when Kenshin saved her from being harassed by some thugs at a food stall. Tomo, who no longer had a home to return to, chose to live with him, initially as part of the rebel group. Over time, Kenshin developed feelings of love for Tomo and wanted to ensure her happiness. Initially, she had approached Kenshin with the intention of seeking revenge for the death of her fiancé, who had been killed by him. However, as time passed, Tomo grew accustomed to being by his side and chose not to pursue her vengeance. Their feelings deepened, and they fell in love before parting ways with Kenshin for the last time. Tomo had scratched Kenshin's face as a reminder of his promise not to kill anyone once an era of peace had been established. When Tomo witnessed her own death and assumed that Kenshin intended to kill her, this drove Enishi to do anything to exact revenge on Kenshin for the death of his beloved older sister. Sanosuke and the others fell silent after hearing this story because they didn't know how to stop Enishi. Karu, who had developed feelings for Kenshin, could only cry in silence after realizing he had truly loved another girl. She believed Kenshin would never be able to open his heart to another girl or love another girl as much as he loved Tomo. Knowing Karu was heartbroken, Megumi tried to persuade her that she could still love Kenshin by fully supporting him. Karu went to see Kenshin and asked him to stay with them and help them solve the problem. However, Kenshin decided to leave because he didn't want to hurt her or the people around him. Meanwhile, at Enichi's headquarters, a samurai named Sho, a former subordinate of Makoto Shizio, entered Enishi's office and attempted to steal his sword collection. Sho was now working on behalf of the Japanese government after losing his fight against Kenshin. That night, he intended to challenge Enishi to a one-on-one duel because he couldn't accept the insult he felt from Enishi regarding his defeat in the fight against Kenshin. Returning to Kamiya's dojo, a girl named Michelle and a young man named Aoshi were waiting for Karu to hand over Tomo's notebook. They were bodyguards who used to work for Takina Kanryo, an illegal opium dealer. However, after defeating Takeda, they decided to join the Japanese police force and help protect civilians. Michelle explained that she had obtained the book from an acquaintance who knew Tomo well and asked her to deliver it to Kenshin. In the evening, Enishi and his troops terrorized the entire city of Kyoto by spreading papers with the words human judgment on them. They launched attacks across the city. Shortly after spreading this message, a man among Enishi's troops blew up several buildings with an explosive weapon resembling cannon fire. When Kenshin saw what had happened, he attempted to stop the attacker Kujarami. An unexpected fight between them ensued, and fortunately, Kenshin managed to defeat Kuchirami and destroy the weapon, even though Kuchirami's weapon was intentionally far superior to his own. On the other hand, Aoshi and Mizuo were also battling another one of Enishi's men named Monjoy. However, because Monjoy's target was Kenshin, he chose to blow up the place and flee. Unfortunately, Aoshi was seriously injured while attempting to protect the residents. Karu arrived at Kamiya's dojo, carrying Cho's lifeless body because he had lost the fight against Eneshi. When Santosuke saw Eneshi appear at their location, he attempted to confront him to protect Karu and the others. However, Eneshi's fighting abilities far surpassed those of Sanosuke, and he easily defeated him. Not long after, Kenshin, who had defeated one of Enishi's men, hurried to Kamiya's dojo to check on his friends. Unfortunately, when Kenshin arrived at the dojo, he discovered Sanosuke bleeding heavily from Enishi's attack. Sanosuke, who was dying, informed Kenshin that Eneshi had taken Karu away from that location. Fortunately, Kenshin found information about Karu's whereabouts on a paper that was found in Cho's mouth. The next day, Saito and other police officers began evacuating the injured residents from the previous night's attack by Enishi's troops. Many buildings had collapsed and burned, resulting in the deaths of numerous city dwellers. Karu, who had just awoken, found herself in a strange house. She tried to run away, but she couldn't leave because the house was located on a small uninhabited island. Not long after, Eneshi approached Karu with the intent to kill her because she had mentioned Tomo's name. However, something held him back from carrying out the murder, and he decided not to go through with it. Meanwhile, Kenshin, still at Kamiya's dojo, decided to leave for the location where Karu was being held captive. Aoshi met Eneshi the next day when he returned to fulfill his promise of handing over his organization to Haishin. Hishi, sensing that his time for vengeance was approaching, decided to transfer his organization to Haishin. However, Haishin believed that Eneshi had given up his organization too easily, suspecting that the Japanese police already knew the location of Eneshi's headquarters. This realization enraged Haishin, and he chased Eneshi and his men away from the location. Soon after, Haishin left the room, planning to kill Kenshin. His primary goal in acquiring Eneshi's mafia organization was to gain enough power and resources to control the Japanese government. He also intended to eliminate Kenshin, believing him to be one of Japan's most powerful samurai who could thwart his plans. Kenshin went to Eneshi's headquarters alone that night, not inviting his friends or the police force because he didn't want more people to become victims in the ongoing conflict of revenge. He had to fight hundreds of Eneshi's men alone with only 2 swords, their edges reversed. Fortunately, Michelle and her friends arrived in the midst of the battle to assist Kenshin in defeating Eneshi's men. Michelle sought revenge against the person who had injured Aoshi in the previous attack. Additionally, Saito and the Shinsengumi police force arrived at the scene with Sanosuke, who was still in critical condition. Thanks to this reinforcement, Kenshin could track down Karu and save her before Eneshi could carry out any harmful actions. Haishin and his troops had planned to surround Kenshin and kill him when he arrived at Eneshi's base. They had even hired a samurai named Sojiro Seda to assassinate Kenshin and Eneshi. It was revealed that Sojiro was a former samurai under Makoto Shizuo who had once defeated Kenshin in a fight. Sojiro unexpectedly attacked Haishin's men, intending to assist Kenshin in defeating Eneshi's troops. Sojiro did all this on purpose because he had experienced personal growth after Kenshin had defeated him in their previous fight. Kenshin finally defeated all of Haishin's men with the help of a skilled samurai like Sojiro. Sojiro then asked Kenshin to accompany him to Karu's house while he fought the remaining enemies alone. When Kenshin arrived before Eneshi, he expressed his understanding of Eneshi's desire for vengeance. He requested that Eneshi not involve the people around him. A fierce and dangerous duel between them began at that moment. Kenshin initially dominated the fight, even breaking one of Eneshi's swords. However, as he took out his other swords, Eneshi became more aggressive and eager to kill Kenshin. In the middle of the fight, Eneshi told Kenshin that a killer's sins could only be atoned for by the killer's death. He asked Kenshin to take his own life, but Kenshin refused to do so because he believed that the best way to atone for his mistakes was to protect those around him, especially those he loved. The battle continued, and Kenshin was able to launch several counterattacks against Eneshi. Filled with rage and vengeance, Ineshi stabbed Kenshin in the chest. Surprisingly, despite seeing the attack, Kenshin did not attempt to dodge or put up any resistance. He tried to look Ineshi in the eyes and apologize. Moments later, Haishin appeared and threatened to shoot them both. However, Karu intervened and stopped him. When Haishin was about to shoot Karu, Kenshin unexpectedly shielded her with his body and allowed himself to be shot. Ineshi was irritated that Haishin had disrupted his fight with Kenshin, so he pressed his body against Haishin and intended to kill him. However, Kenshin approached Ineshi and thanked him for saving him and protecting Karu. He saw his older sister's side in her and didn't want to see her hurt. Karu couldn't stop crying, remembering his memories with his older sister Tomo. Ineshi was finally apprehended by the Japanese police and imprisoned for all his crimes a few days later. While incarcerated, he received a package from Karu containing letters and notebooks that Tomo had left behind. In the book, Tomo expressed that she had abandoned her desire for vengeance and preferred to love Kenshin because he was the one who had brought her new happiness. Despite the fact that Kenshin had killed hundreds of people, Tomo believed that he could bring peace to their country and save more lives than he had taken. She even gave her life to protect Kenshin because he was a vital figure who could usher in a new era for the country. She could only cry and regret her actions that had claimed the lives of many people. After learning that everything Kenshin did was to bring peace to the country, Kenshin and Karu went to Tomo's grave to pay their respects and express their gratitude. Tomo was a figure who had helped bring peace to the country. And with that, the story comes to an end. sure to subscribe and turn on notification for more movie recaps.